When we talk about healing the relationship with our mother, many of us secretly think it means confronting her, correcting her, or waiting for her to finally say, "I'm sorry." But true healing rarely begins that way. It doesn't start with an apology. It starts with understanding and a deep, compassionate curiosity about what really happened, not just on the surface, but beneath it. Most of us grew up seeing our mothers as superhuman, for the ones who held everything together. And in that illusion, we sometimes forget that she was once a little girl too, a girl who may have never been seen, heard, or loved the way she deserved, a girl who may have been taught that her worth depended on how much she sacrificed, a girl who had to hide her emotions to survive in a world that punished women for being too sensitive or too strong. So when you look back at your childhood and see the places she failed you, the silence, the anger, the distance, the criticism, pause before judgment. It's not about excusing the pain, it's about understanding the roots of it. She didn't invent her behavior in isolation, she inherited it. Her reactions, her fears, her emotional walls, they were passed down through generations of survival, not love. But here's the most important truth. Understanding your mother doesn't mean you have to agree with her choices. It doesn't mean you have to accept her behavior or pretend it didn't hurt. It means you choose to see her as a whole human being, flawed, scared, imperfect, and wounded, just like you. When you stop seeing her as the mother who failed and start seeing her as a woman who was doing the best she could with what she knew, something powerful happens inside you. You stop waiting for her to fix it. You stop chasing closure that may never come. You stop defining yourself by what she couldn't give. This understanding doesn't erase the pain bond. It transforms it. It softens the resentment that's been living in your heart. It turns bitterness into perspective, and it gives you back your power, the power to decide what to do with that story now. Blame keeps you connected to the wound. Understanding helps you connect to wisdom. When you finally understand that your mother's behavior wasn't a reflection of your worth, but a mirror of her wounds, that's the moment your healing begins, because you cannot heal what you still hate, and you cannot love yourself fully while holding anger for the woman who gave you life. Healing doesn't mean you let her off the hook. It means you free yourself from the hook that's been tearing your heart open for years. Understanding is not the same as forgiving, and it's definitely not forgetting. It's simply saying, I see now, I see where it came from, and I choose peace over pain. Every mother loves in the only way she knows how. But sometimes the love we receive doesn't feel like love at all. It feels conditional, inconsistent, or confusing. And as children, we don't have the capacity to understand that. We only know the feeling. When she smiled, we felt safe. When she was cold, we felt invisible. As we grow older, we start to see a pattern, that her affection came and went depending on whether we met her expectations. We learned that love could be withdrawn, that silence was punishment, and that approval had to be earned. But the truth is, her love was never pure. It was filtered through her pain, her fears, and her unhealed wounds. A mother who was never told she was enough will struggle to make her child feel enough. A mother who lived her life trying to please everyone will unknowingly raise a child who does the same. A mother who was controlled will try to control because it's the only version of safety she understands. You see, love isn't always expressed through words or warmth. Sometimes love shows up as control because she's terrified you'll make the same mistake she did. Sometimes it shows up as criticism because she believes perfectio. One of the hardest emotional truths to accept is this: you can feel compassion for your mother and still acknowledge that she hurt you. The world tries to make us believe it's one or the other, that if we feel empathy, we must excuse her behavior, or that if we recognize her pain, we must forget our own. But healing isn't about choosing sides. It's about holding both truths at once, the love and the pain, the understanding and the anger, the compassion and the boundaries. You can look at your mother's story and see the suffering that shaped her, the loneliness, the trauma, the fear, and still say what she did was not okay. That's emotional maturity. That's the heart of healing. Because compassion without honesty is denial, and honesty without compassion is cruelty. Healing requires both, the courage to tell the truth and the grace to see the humanity in the person who hurt you. For many of us, our mothers carried unimaginable burdens. They lived in times when emotional awareness wasn't encouraged. They were told to endure, not express, to stay quiet, not question. And somewhere in that silence, their pain hardened into patterns that ended up shaping the way they loved us. So yes, you can understand that your mother had a hard life. You can see that she was doing the best she could, but you can also admit that her best left wounds on your soul, wounds that made you question your worth, your safety, and your right to be heard. Compassion doesn't erase that truth. It simply allows you to see the full picture. You stop seeing her as a villain and start seeing her as a human being, complex, imperfect, and sometimes deeply broken. And at the same time, you stop pretending that her pain cancels out yours. When you allow both realities to coexist, something miraculous happens inside you. You stop fighting with the truth. You stop swinging between anger and guilt. You stop asking, do I forgive her or stay angry? And instead you arrive at peace, the quiet kind of peace that comes when you no longer need one story to be entirely right or entirely wrong. You can say, she was doing her best and her best still hurt me. You can say, I understand her pain and I still deserved better. You can say, I love her and I choose to protect myself. That balance, that emotional honesty, is what healing actually looks like. It's not about pretending it didn't happen. It's about finally giving yourself permission to feel what you've always felt, but were too scared to admit. Because when you deny your pain, it doesn't disappear. It buries itself deeper. It shows up in your relationships, in your self-talk, in the way you handle conflict and love. But when you face it with compassion, the pain begins to loosen its grip. It transforms from a wound into wisdom. Holding compassion while acknowledging your pain doesn't make you weak, and it makes you whole. It's a quiet act of strength, the kind that rebuilds you from the inside out. It's saying, I can see your story and still honor mine. That's how generational healing begins, not through blame, not through denial, but through balance, through the ability to hold both truths in the same heart, the one that understands where she came from and the one that refuses to carry her pain any longer. That's what real freedom feels like, the kind that doesn't need revenge, permission, or perfection, only truth and love that finally includes you. No matter how old we get, there's a small part of us, a tender, hopeful child, still waiting for our mother's love to finally feel safe. It's the part of you that still longs for her approval when you succeed, the part that still aches when she doesn't call, the part that wonders, why can't she just see me for who I am? That child still lives inside you, not as weakness, but as proof that you were once a little soul who needed warmth and safety and didn't always receive it. Even after decades, that inner healing doesn't just happen because time passes. It happens when awareness enters the room. When you finally open your eyes and say, this pattern ends with me. Every family carries a story, not just of love and care, but of pain, silence, fear, and emotional patterns that repeat like echoes through generations. You might think you're reacting to your mother, but often you're actually reacting to your grandmother's pain, your great-grandmother's silence, your ancestors' survival. What we don't heal, we hand down, not because we want to, but because pain has a way of seeking expression through those who come next. Maybe your mother was emotionally distant because her mother was cruel or absent. Maybe she controlled you because no one ever let her feel safe when she was young. Maybe she criticized because she was raised to believe perfection was the only path to being loved. And so the cycle continues, pain turning into protection, love tangled with fear, and affection delivered through control or silence, until one person, you, becomes conscious enough to see it. That's what breaking the cycle means. It means you choose not to repeat what broke you. You decide to live with awareness instead of reaction. You stop saying, that's just how I am, and start asking, why am I like this? Becoming conscious means noticing the small things, how you shut down when someone raises their voice because your mother's anger once felt dangerous, how you people please because as a child, keeping her happy was the only way to feel safe, how you overgive, over-explain, or overperform because deep down, you're still trying to earn the love that should have been unconditional. When you see these patterns, don't shame yourself. Awareness is not blame, it's freedom. It's the moment you stop living on emotional autopilot and start writing a new story. Breaking the cycle isn't. About confronting your mother and demanding change. It's about changing yourself, not to become who she wanted, but to become who you were meant to be before the wounds. It's about learning to respond, not react. It's about choosing calm instead of chaos, truth instead of silence, love instead of control. And let's be honest, it's not easy. Healing generational pain can feel lonely because you're doing something no one before you had the strength or awareness to do. You'll have moments when you want to go back to old habits because they feel familiar. You'll doubt yourself, you'll cry, you'll feel like you're betraying your family's story. But you're not betraying anyone, you're honoring them by ending the suffering they never could. When you heal, you don't just heal for yourself. You heal for your children, for the relationships you'll have, and for the future generations who will never have to carry the same emotional weight. Your decision to become conscious, to stop reacting, to start reflecting, that is the most profound act of love you could ever offer to your lineage. You're not erasing your mother's story, you're rewriting its ending. You're saying, I understand where it came from, but I choose differently. I see the pain, but I will not pass it on. I love her, but I will not live in her wounds. That is what generational courage looks like. Love that heals instead of hurts, awareness that frees instead of repeats. When you become conscious, you step out of survival and into creation. You stop being a product of your past and start being the author of your future. And maybe one day when someone in your family speaks of you, they'll say, she was the one who changed everything. For so many of us, especially those raised to be the good child, setting boundaries with our mother feels like betrayal. We're taught that love means endless. Patience, constant forgiveness, and putting someone else's needs before our own, especially when that person is a parent. But the truth is, boundaries are not an act of rebellion. They're an act of... One of the most painful and liberating truths you will ever face is this: you cannot heal your mother. No matter how much you love her, how deeply you understand her story, or how long you've tried, her healing is not your responsibility. Many of us grew up emotionally parenting our parents. We became the listeners, the fixers, the emotional caretakers, the ones who carried their pain because they couldn't. You might have been the child who tried to make her happy, to calm her anger, to lift her when she was low. You learned early that keeping her stable meant keeping yourself safe. And without realizing it, you built your worth around being the one who held everything together. But here's the truth. You were never meant to be your mother's healer. You were meant to be her child. It's not your job to fix the wounds she refuses to face. It's not your job to save her from her own story. And it's not your job to carry guilt for the pain she never learned to process. Her healing, if it happens, will come from her willingness to see herself clearly, not from your efforts to change her. You can offer empathy, but you cannot do her inner work. You can love her deeply, but you cannot make her choose growth. You can forgive, but forgiveness doesn't mean becoming her emotional caretaker again. It's heavy to accept that the person who was supposed to protect you may still be lost in her own suffering, but it's even heavier to live your whole life trying to rescue someone who doesn't want to be rescued. Many adult children confuse love with responsibility. They think, if I stop helping her, she'll fall apart. But what if her falling apart is exactly what she needs to finally face herself? Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop saving them. Healing your mother's wounds for her robs both of you, and it keeps you stuck in roles that don't allow either of you to grow. When you take responsibility for her healing, you unconsciously keep her dependent on you. And when she remains dependent, you never get to experience a relationship based on equality and truth, only guilt and duty. So, let go. Not out of anger, but out of love. Let her face her own mirror. Let her choose or not choose the work she must do for herself. You can stand beside her, but you can't walk the path for her. When you stop trying to fix your mother, you reclaim your own life. You reclaim your energy, your peace, your identity, all the things you lost while trying to hold her broken pieces together. You were never meant to be the emotional glue that keeps the family intact. You were meant to live, to love freely, to find joy beyond the shadow of her pain. And maybe by setting her free from your need to rescue her, you'll give her the greatest gift of all, the opportunity to face her truth. It's not cruelty to let her face her own consequences. It's courage. It's saying, I love you enough to stop carrying what isn't mine. When you finally release that burden, you'll feel lighter, because healing was never meant to be inherited. It's a personal responsibility. Your mother has her story and you have yours, and both deserve to unfold in their own time, in their own way. You are not abandoning her by letting go. You're honoring her humanity and yours. Because love that requires you to disappear isn't love, it's bondage. And when you stop trying to heal her, you finally begin to heal yourself. Healing doesn't mean you have to cut your mother out of your life completely, but it also doesn't mean you must keep her close at the cost of your sanity. True healing is about finding the sacred middle ground, where love and boundaries can coexist. You can love your mother deeply and still say, I can't have this conversation right. See, now, you can appreciate her sacrifices and still acknowledge her mistakes. You can feel compassion for her pain and still protect yourself from her behavior. That's the maturity of healing, Lee. Healing your relationship with your mother isn't always about reconciliation. It's about peaceful coexistence. It's about learning to hold her in your heart without letting her chaos rule your mind. It's about remembering. You can honor where you came from and still walk boldly toward who you're becoming. You can love her and still protect your peace. That's not disloyalty, that's wisdom, that's emotional adulthood, that's healing. At some point, every child of a complicated mother has to face the same crossroads. The moment when you stop asking, why did she do this to me, and start asking, what do I need to do to heal? Healing your mother wound isn't about turning her into a villain. It's about acknowledging that she was a woman before she was your mother, with dreams, fears, insecurities, and unhealed pain of her own. It's about seeing her clearly without losing sight of yourself. You may never get the apology you deserve. You may never have the kind of relationship you longed for, but you can have peace. And peace is worth more than perfection. The real healing begins when you stop waiting for her to change and decide to change how you respond to her. When you stop chasing her approval and start building your self-worth from within. When you stop carrying her pain as your own and finally let go of the guilt that was never yours to bear. You don't heal by rewriting the past. You heal by reclaiming your power in the present, by saying, yes, this hurt me. Yes, it shaped me, but it will not define me anymore. And maybe one day when you look at her, whether she's still here or not, you'll see her not through the eyes of a wounded child, but through the heart of a grown, grounded soul who has made peace with what was. That's the gift of this journey. You stop needing her to be different, and you start becoming the person you always needed her to be. You may still love her, you may still grieve her, but you will no longer lose yourself in her. Because your healing is not about changing your mother. It's about coming home to yourself with grace, with strength, and with a heart that finally feels light again. And when that day comes, you'll realize something profound. You were never broken. You were becoming